It has not been a good first season for Josh Pastner at UNLV, but I might have some optimism for you. What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, UNLV has struggled this year. It actually might get worse too due to a significant injury. Plus, one NBA owner wanted to move his team to Vegas, and the league stopped him. Why? And the Golden Knights, their roster construction, it's dragging the team down. If you listened to or watched yesterday's show, I accidentally left in a couple of seconds where I coughed and drank some water. So shout out to those of you that saw that and let me know. Thank you. Here we go. UNLV is back tonight. They are playing Fresno State. Fun fact by Ken Pomerank, Fresno State is 135 and UNLV is 136. Both these teams are equally bad or good, however optimistic you want to be. But what is interesting about these two teams is that Fresno State has been a fairly consistent mediocre team, while UNLV has been all over the place. So Bart Torvik has a stat called Game Score, which just measures out 1 to 100, how good your performance was. Was it in the top 10 percentile, bottom 10 percentile? Was it the 50th percentile? Just an average game. Fresno State this year has had 4 games over 75. So 4 games that were really good and 3 games under 25. So 3 games that were really bad. UNLV has 6 under 25 and 9 over 25. So UNLV has been all over the place. More than half of their games have come in one of those two top or bottom end performances rather than sort of baseline through the middle. By the way, this is probably going to be one of the more nerdier shows, which means I'm going to enjoy it, but some of you won't. But so UNLV and Fresno State, simply put, kind of tells you UNLV is going to decide who wins this game and not Fresno State, because you would expect Fresno State to play just a completely competent, mediocre, average game because they're just a competent, mediocre, average college basketball team. And UNLV is the one that either plays really well or really poorly more often than not. UNLV did already beat Fresno State by 12 this year. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn was awesome in that game, but problematically, Tyron Jones was 7 from 7 from the field and actually 4 for 4 in free throws, and he might not play in this game. We'll get to Tyron Jones in just a minute because that's where some of this optimism that I have is going to come in. But I do want to touch on one other thing for this game that I find funny, because Fresno State plays pretty fast this year. They got a fast tempo. And Josh Pastner takes the UNLV job, and even into this season says that he wants to be the Runnin' Rebels. We're not the walking rebels or the jogging rebels, right? How many coaches have you heard say that since they've gotten the job at UNLV? Pastner did it too. Every coach does it. And to Pastner's credit, right, UNLV is a top 100 team this year in tempo. They were top 25 in non-conference play, but they have slowed down quite a bit in Mountain West play. They're only the 5th fastest in Mountain West play, and their possessions per game is basically average in conference play compared to the rest of the country. So this is no longer a fast-paced team. And Pastner alluded to it last week when he talked to the media about how he wants to play fast, but that isn't necessarily best for his team. And I find it funny just because this has happened so often where a coach comes in and he says something about, we want to be the Runnin' Rebels, we don't want to walk the ball at the floor, and then you get into your first year, or maybe it's just into your second year, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this team's playing kind of slow. And it's like, oh, yeah. We don't think the best way to win is to play fast. We think it's to play slow. That's going to be better for us, because at the end of the day, playing fast doesn't translate to winning more than playing slow, and nobody cares about how fast you play if you're losing basketball games. Win the games, right? Every single UNLV fan will defend you, say you're the best coach, say you're the best team if you play the ugliest, grossest, most hideous style of basketball, but you win. If Josh Pastner gets this team back to the NCAA tournament by playing the slowest pace in the country, he's the best UNLV basketball coach in a decade. Hell, we're getting close to 2 decades to be able to say that. So Fresno State plays fast. I actually think this game will be a little bit faster tempo, but it is funny that this happens. It's just a repeating cycle for UNLV coaches. Now, on Tyron Jones, he is still day-to-day. That's how Josh Pastner described it. He has not played in the last 2 games for UNLV. except for like the first minute of that New Mexico game where he re-injured his shoulder. And both of those games were disasters for UNLV. They had a blowout loss to New Mexico. They had a blowout loss to Nevada. Neither one went well. So no Tyron Jones would be bad again. And yesterday, Josh Pastner talked about what they've missed with Tyron Jones. And he mentioned a few things, but the main thing that he talked about was Tyron Jones on defense, his shot blocking and his rim protection. And if you look this year, because I was curious, like how important is Tyron Jones to this defense? Tyron Jones is second in the Mountain West in blocks per game, and he has accounted for 42% of all of UNLV's block shots this year. 42%. He's almost responsible for half of all of UNLV's block shots this season. So obviously, very important to blocking shots and rim protection. But beyond that, he's also 15th in the conference in steals per game, second on the team to Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. He creates block shots and steals. He creates bad possessions for the opponent more than anybody else, right? He's creating havoc defensively. But then there's also some advanced stats which take into account like opponent scoring and everything like that. And Bart Torvik and Evan Mia both have some numbers here. Bart Torvik and his individual defensive player rating has him as the second most important defensive player on the team. Evan Mia has him as the third most important defensive player on the team. So missing him, the obvious block shots, but that is translating to better defensive numbers and better defensive possessions for this team to the point where he's one of the 2 or 3 most important defensive players. And it's really hard for UNLV to make that up with this current team because Emmanuel Stephan should be a good rim protector. And in fact, on a per minute basis, Emmanuel Stephan has good block shots numbers. It's not as good as Tyron Jones, but he is blocking a good amount of shots. But Emmanuel Stephan doesn't play a lot because he fouls out, right? Per 40 minutes, Emmanuel Stephan is averaging 7.8 fouls per minute. Per 40 minutes. Like, it's ridiculous how often he's fouling out. He played 15 minutes and fouled out of the last game. So UNLV doesn't have Tyron Jones, who's their best shot blocker, their second best shot blocker you can't rely on to play more than 20 minutes in a game because of the foul trouble. And then outside of that, Kamani Hamilton, plays in the front court, but he's not a rim protecting center, right? He's not a center, period. Jacob Benarby is the backup center to Emmanuel Stephan. He's not a rim protector, right? Like, that's not part of his game. And to be honest, lots of teams look to attack him when he is on the floor. That is the weak spot that opponents want to go after. So they just don't have it when Jones is hurt and then Stephan is in foul trouble. And I think this one, like we've talked about the roster for this team and sort of the poor job that UNLV's had. I actually don't know that you blame Josh Pastner for this one because Ladji Dembele is hurt and he's a center who we saw 5 games of him, but his blocks per minute was actually very high as well in those games. But Ladji Dembele played 5 games. He's hurt. He's done for the year. So that's one center you're down. Emmanuel Stephan is your backup center. Jacob Benarby, your third center. In theory, that's good center depth. And if you lose one, like, it's not great, but there's still 2 more bodies there. The problem is that Tyron Jones, the power forward, develops or shows us this great shot blocking, but now he's hurt as well. And so you've lost right now they don't have 2 of their 3 best rim protectors due to injury. I don't know that you can really blame that one on Josh Pastner when we look at roster construction. The point guard spot, absolutely. Miles Che was supposed to be the point guard. He's not going to play a single game because of injury this year for UNLV. Cool. Who's your second point guard? It's Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, who's not a point guard, and we've heard that from Josh Pastner 100 times this season that he's playing out of position. What do you mean you didn't get a second point guard in here? Like, that one, the point guard position deserved. The center position, maybe they're not good enough, right? I think that might be fair to nitpick and say, oh, is Ladji Dembele, Emmanuel Stephan, Jacob Benarby, is that good enough to be like a tournament team? But as far as just how many you have, I think that's a pretty harsh way to point to and say, oh, he did a poor job constructing the roster. I don't think that's on Pastner. Now, big picture takeaway that is positive. And this is where I think there's some optimism. I got 2 things for you that are optimistic. But the first one here is that Tyron Jones is a freshman and he has this big positive impact on defense. He is a good defensive player. And I know you can lose any player in the transfer portal, right? In fact, you should probably expect it. But Tyron Jones, in theory, comes back next year and is a building block for this team. In theory, you keep Tyron Jones, and he's maybe even better next year. I don't know, like, how much do players develop? That's a hot take I have. Player development's a big myth. But how much better does Tyron Jones get? We'll see. But even if he's just the same guy, he is a productive, effective player at the Mountain West level. Ideally, he's a high-energy guy who makes plays on defense, is good in transition, and is like the fourth or fifth option on your team. Or maybe he comes off the bench even. It's probably the best case scenario. But if UNLV is able to recruit, 3 or 4 players that are better than Tyron Jones and he still starts or is just a sixth man, like, you could have a really good team. But Tyron Jones is a player that can be helpful to getting to the NCAA tournament. And specifically the fact that he's already making defensive impacts is a big deal, because that's often a place where freshmen don't give you anything. So I think that's a really good takeaway, is how good he's been, how effective he's been defensively. The other big picture takeaway, UNLV's defense is not good this year. The average points per possession in college basketball this season is 1.09, according to KenPom. This is the list of teams that UNLV has held below that mark, below the national average this season: Memphis, Tennessee State, La Sierra, and Air Force. That's it. They've only held 4 opponents under the national average of offensive efficiency this season. That's 2 bad teams. Air Force is horrendous. Tennessee State's not quite that bad, but they're not good either. 1 non-Division I team in La Sierra. That one shouldn't even count. And then Memphis is on that list. Memphis is not good. They're not going to the NCAA tournament, but they're not horrible. They're like right around 100th in the country. So that's it. I would argue they've had 1 good defensive game this season, and it's the game at Memphis. They just don't have good defensive games. And so when they win, it's usually because the offense has a really good game and they just sort of outscore the opponent. But the good news, or the positive outlook for it, Josh Pastner's been a head coach this is his 15th season. In the previous 14 at Memphis and Georgia Tech, 12 of those 14 seasons, his teams had a higher defensive efficiency than offensive efficiency. And in the years that he took teams to the NCAA tournament, his teams ranked 65th, 17th again, and 50th, and 68th. There's one more year, and 68th in defensive efficiency. He also had another 6 non-tournament teams that were in the top 100, including a Georgia Tech team that was 6th in defensive efficiency in the entire country. 6th. Didn't make the tournament because the offense was bad. Basically, Pastner's career has been good defensive teams, right? Obviously, 65th isn't amazing, but it'd be like one of the best defensive teams UNLV's had in a decade. So what he's done in his career points to UNLV being better defensively in the future. Offensive side of the ball, Pastner's teams haven't been as good. So that might be some problems looking forward and sort of projecting what Pastner's teams might look like. But his defenses have been good. So this UNLV defense is not any good, but I think what Pastner's done in his career would give you some optimism that, he'll probably figure this out, right? We would think so. Now, one last thing on UNLV. Pastner used a lot of strong language when talking about his team this week. He called the 2 games from last week insulting. That's the word that he used, insulting. But he also said, of my 15 years, this has been the most challenging year on the floor without a question. And that was in response to me asking him, has this been the most up and down team he's ever coached? And I gave you those game score numbers from Bart Torvik, right? He's had 6 games where they've been under 25, the bottom 25 percentile, and 9 games where they've been over 75, so the top 25 percentile. Pastner has coached other teams with big swings. His last year at Georgia Tech, they had 8 performances that were under that bottom 25 percentile and 10 that were over. He also had in 2019 8 that were under and 13 that were over. So he's had a couple of other teams, mainly at Georgia Tech, where there's been this extreme inconsistency. Now, there's still 10 games left in the season, so UNLV might be able to surpass some of those numbers the rest of the way. But he has done this a few times. But for the most part, he's had a lot more consistent teams than this. And like the Memphis years, he had a 3-year stretch where he only had one performance in the bottom 25th percentile. So Pastner might be living in the moment a little bit when he says this is the most challenging or this is the biggest roller coaster, because there were some other teams that were similar in this regard, but he's actually had some consistent teams. Now, some of those Memphis teams, some of those Georgia Tech teams weren't good, but they gave you a more consistent, balanced effort on a regular basis. It wasn't, okay, you went and beat Utah State in your best performance of the season, might be the best Mountain West performance of the season for any conference team. But then you've also been annihilated by Wyoming and New Mexico. And you're just like, okay, what happens here? I would, based on his past, I would think Pastner is going to have his team's defense better and the consistency is going to be better going forward. Do either of those things translate to the NCAA tournament? Not necessarily, because he had the 6th best defense in the country one year, didn't make the tournament. He had consistent teams at Georgia Tech and Memphis, but they weren't good enough to go to the NCAA tournament. So those are two things that Pastner throughout his career has done a little bit better than what this team has shown this year that I would expect to get better in the future.
Battle Blast, been serving Las Vegas since June 2012 with the very best in family entertainment. We are proud to provide the best facility, equipment, and service possible. Strap on laser tag vests, step into the 5,600 square foot 2-story arena designed to look like a worn, torn city street. An exciting atmosphere filled with exhilarating music, blacklight effects, and fog. Battle Blast also features a viewing deck for those not playing can watch players vest up and catch a view of the action going on in the arena. In between games, check out our arcade and prize center and enjoy tasty treats from our snack bar. Birthday parties, sports teams, group outings, and corporate events. Battle Blast does it all. We want to make your Battle Blast experience so good you'll want to return again and again. Battle Blast is the ultimate destination for family fun and friendly competition.
Bischoff's Briefs is brought to you by Battle Blast Las Vegas, the best laser tag in Vegas. Battle Blast is the spot to take your next event, whether it's your kid's birthday party or a corporate event, whatever it is. Battle Blast Las Vegas. You can do it for your own birthday. Get your friends, get your family, get your coworkers together, and go see who's better at laser tag. There's arcade and prizes as well. It's more than just laser tag. Battle Blast Las Vegas, located at 8125 West Sahara Avenue. Your next stop for fun in Vegas. We had a fun tidbit as far as Las Vegas professional basketball. So Pablo Torre had a podcast about the Memphis Grizzlies owner, Robert Pera. And the big investigation in the whole podcast there is about Russian drones that Robert Pera's company, Ubiquity, is using. They're giving technology to Russia, who is using it for their drones that they've used to attack Ukrainian civilians. That's the main story. It's more important than what I'm about to tell you. But one of the details that Pablo Torre had is that when Robert Pera bought the Grizzlies in 2012, he wanted to move them out of Memphis. Pablo Torre said Robert Pera's whole goal when he bought the Grizzlies was to move it to Las Vegas. So we could have had an NBA team for the last decade, but the NBA didn't let it happen because they're haters, and we still don't have one to this day. And I'm not convinced it's happening anytime soon because they're going to build a league in Europe and focus on that instead. Also interesting from that podcast, Pablo Torre had David Sampson on there, who used to run the Miami Marlins. And David Sampson basically, in response to this, hey, he wanted to move the team to Vegas. He said that like leagues, other owners, they're not going to let you buy a team and move it to a new city immediately if it's going to increase the team valuation by a huge amount. Apparently, when he was running the Marlins, he wanted to move them to Washington. And the owner said, no, your valuation is going to go up too high. And what happened is Major League Baseball bought the Expos and moved them to Washington, D.C. instead of the Marlins moving there. So that was his take on why they wouldn't let it happen. He mentioned expansion fee in there because in theory, if you let the Grizzlies go to Las Vegas, they'll pay an a relocation fee, but it won't be as high as what an expansion fee is. So you want to keep Las Vegas open to get that expansion fee. And as we have seen, to use as leverage. Granted, if Memphis is open, you could maybe use Memphis as leverage, but to use that as leverage for other teams who want public money to build arenas or whatever they want their public money for. But we could have had the Grizzlies. Could have had them, and the NBA said, no, you're not moving the Memphis Grizzlies to Las Vegas. One other thing from that, David Sampson threw out fairly casually that Shaq or LeBron are going to buy the expansion team that comes to Las Vegas. And he said it the way he phrased it kind of caught me off guard, because we've heard LeBron and Shaq before as like potential owners, but like they're going to have to be part owners. That neither one of them, as far as I know, is going to be able to afford the $7 billion expansion fee that's going to be paid by whoever owns the team in Vegas. So in theory, yeah, LeBron or Shaq or both are going to be part of some group that buys it, and maybe they're like a face of the group or have a little bit more say than the other owners. They're the Tom Brady of this organization. But like the way David Sampson phrased it made it sound like LeBron or Shaq were just going to buy the team out. I'm like, I don't think they have that kind of money. I don't think they're buying the expansion franchise to move to Las Vegas. Now, the Mountain West, the television deal for this upcoming season has not been announced. We talked about that last week because Wyoming is asking for some public money because they think they're going to get less money in their television deal. Well, according to Chris Vanini, the Mountain West television deal is expected to be announced this week. The Pac-12 already announced their media rights deal. However, the Pac-12 did not announce any dollar amounts that are attached to that. So we don't know how much those schools are getting. Is it 5 million? Is it 10? Is it 15? We don't know. We can assume it's on the lower end because normally these conferences announce how much their media rights deal are worth as a way to brag. And if you don't announce it, then you're doing the opposite of bragging, which is hiding in shame. So when the Mountain West announces this week, will we get a dollar amount to it? Or at the very least, will it get leaked to the media? In theory, if the Mountain West announces this on Thursday or something, and there's no dollar amount attached to it, we can assume it's probably pretty low. So we'll see. Also, the other big question on this, because the dollar amount's important for just overall health of your athletic departments, but the other big question for fans is, what does this look like? Vanini reported that CBS Sports Network is going to be a part of it again. They've been a broadcast partner for a long time with the Mountain West. But who else? Who's sort of secondary? Is CBS Sports even the primary there? Is it going to be worse than the current Mountain West television deal? Are there going to be less games on real television channels? Are there going to be games on a streaming-only platform? Like, I'm curious to see what this is. And basically, how hard is it for you to watch UNLV play? Football, basketball. Like, how difficult is that going to be? Because right now, it's not too bad. You do got to find some games on the Mountain West Network. But right now, it's fairly easy, right? If you have cable, if you have DirecTV, you can get these games, and then, hey, we got to tune into some non-conference games on the Mountain West Network. But for the most part, it's pretty easy. I'm curious what that looks like next year when this is a much less attractive conference to these broadcast partners. In the NFL, the league is going to play a game in Paris next year. The Saints are going to be the home team. A French media outlet reported that the Browns will be the team to play the New Orleans Saints. The Raiders are scheduled to play a game at New Orleans, so that could have been the game moved to Paris, but apparently they're taking the Browns and the Saints over there. But there are going to be 8 international games next season. Paris, Melbourne, Australia, Rio de Janeiro, Munich, Madrid, and then there's 3 games in London. And unless somebody plays twice, because we've seen that before, but unless somebody plays twice, that means half the NFL is going to be playing an international game next year. We had that story a couple of weeks ago where Bob Kraft said that they're going to go to 18 games and there's going to be an international game for every single team in the future. So it's not going to be too long before every single team plays a game outside of the United States every single year. But at least this year, it'll be half of the teams in the league. Whether that's a good thing or not is to you to decide. Soccer leagues in Europe are very much against their regular season games getting moved to a different country. There was a planned Barcelona game that was supposed to be in the United States in December that got shut down because of protests from the teams themselves, but also the fans. So the United States, we're fine with that. We're fine with a lot of things that other parts of the world are not. The Broncos are promoting Davis Webb to offensive coordinator. Davis Webb was the Broncos quarterbacks coach. They fired the offensive coordinator, and now they've finished their process of interviewing, and Davis Webb is going to get the offensive coordinator job. It always seemed weird that he was a serious contender for the Raiders head coaching job, given that he'd never been a coordinator before. Like, I have to assume you really blow people away in interviews to even be, in the final running there. How'd you get the interviews in the first place might be the more genuine question. But I think one of the questions is, like, who's calling the plays there? Because if Sean Payton's still calling the plays, like, yeah, you're the offensive coordinator, but that's not the part of the game that, like, we really want to, that is the part of the game we really want to see from you to sort of evaluate, should you be given credit for what an offense looks like? And if Payton's still calling the plays, okay. Also, this is from over the weekend, but Chiefs quarterback Gardner Minshew did not tear his ACL. Adam Schefter tweeted out that he didn't tear his ACL. This injury happened in December, and it took him a month to find out it wasn't torn? Or did nobody just check in on Gardner Minshew's health because it was Gardner Minshew, and it just took a month for anybody to ask on the outside, to ask about it? He's a free agent, no torn ACL, bring him back to Vegas, right? Why not? He actually, if he goes back to Kansas City, he might get to start a few games before Patrick Mahomes comes back. But this has been Bischoff's Briefs, brought to you by Battle Blast Las Vegas, the best laser tag in Vegas. Host your next birthday party at Battle Blast. If you book the party package, you'll get a private party room, dedicated host, pizza, soda, arcade tokens, and of course, laser tag. Plus, you can add on a game for adults to play after you watch your kids play laser tag. Battle Blast Las Vegas, located at 8125 West Sahara Avenue, your next stop for fun in Las Vegas. If you want to support me more, check me out at Patreon, patreon.com/technicallycorrect with Tyler Bischoff. Got some bonus content up there. Right now, most recently, there is a story up there about the Golden Knights and why Tomas Hertl is playing poorly right now. There are a bunch of numbers in that story. I am not going to yell all of the numbers at you right now, but I am going to give you the gist of that story. Go subscribe and read the whole thing. It's good for you. But what the Golden Knights have run into is a lack of centers, and specifically a lack of centers that Bruce Cassidy is willing to play in the defensive zone, or wants to play. Sometimes he has to play guys he doesn't want to play in the defensive zone. But William Karlsson is hurt. Senbin.Vegas reported it could be season ending. There might have been or might be a surgery that keeps him out for the rest of the year. So Karlsson's hurt. Obviously, William Karlsson is a center that took a ton of defensive zone faceoffs for the Golden Knights. Colton Sissons is also hurt as well. We haven't really gotten an update on him other than, hey, he's out until the Olympic break, which that's this week. At least that's the last games they play are this week. So we'll see if he's back after the Olympics. And then Brett Howden is hurt as well. But the Golden Knights came into this season with 4 legitimate NHL level centers: Eichel, Hertl, Karlsson, and Colton Sissons. And then Brett Howden was a winger that's played quite a bit at center as sort of that 5th option. But that was it. The rest of the organization, there's not other wingers that play center. There's not guys like, he's in the AHL, but he's played a decent chunk in the NHL. There's not really a lot of depth in this organization to play center. And so what we've seen with the injuries is Mitch Marner play a lot of center. We've seen Riley Smith do it as well. But Mitch Marner has been playing almost exclusively center for over a month now. There have been a couple of games where they shifted him back to the wing. But the problems that it's causing are that Mitch Marner's playing center. Bruce Cassidy does not want to play Mitch Marner at center in the defensive zone, or specifically taking defensive zone faceoffs. So what you're getting is a lot of shifts where it's an offensive zone faceoff. Mitch Marner's line is going to take that, right? They're not impacting Jack Eichel's usage. Eichel is used all over the ice when they need goals, when they need to defend. He's just all around great. Trust him everywhere, use him everywhere. But with Marner now, like, almost exclusively getting offensive zone faceoff starts, and nobody else is really a good option, right? Tanner Lisinski gets called up to do it. He doesn't want Riley Smith taking them either. He didn't want either of those guys taking defensive zone faceoffs. It means Bruce Cassidy only has 2 centers on his team to take defensive zone faceoffs. Jack Eichel, and now Tomas Hertl is second on that list. But here's the thing. Throughout his entire Golden Knights career, Hertl's never been a big defensive zone faceoff guy. Not because he can't win defensive zone faceoffs. That's not the problem here. Marner can't. Marner has won 19% of his defensive zone faceoffs that he's taken this year. Hertl's perfectly fine as far as winning them, but Hertl is not as good defensively as a Karlsson or an Eichel. And for the most part, when he's been in Vegas, Hertl's been on the line that has sort of been the offensive line for the Golden Knights. He's played primarily with Pavel Dorofeyev this year, right? They don't want Dorofeyev in the defensive zone, so they get more offensive zone starts. But now, because Marner has to soak up so many of those and doesn't take the defensive zone ones, and you can't have Eichel take all of the defensive zone faceoffs, it means Tomas Hertl is starting in the defensive zone way more than he ever has in his Golden Knights career. And since Marner has been at center, the Golden Knights suck with Tomas Hertl on the ice. They're not good with Hertl on the ice. Their overall production since Marner started doing it in late December until now, their 5-on-5 goals are dead even when Hertl's on the ice, right? And the expected goals are under 50%. Meaning that they should be getting outscored based on the chances created by both teams when Hertl's on the ice over the last, more than a month now, because Marner's playing center and Hertl has to play more in the defensive zone. And it's been even worse since Colton Sissons got hurt, because Sissons, Golden Knights trade for him, and Kelly McCrimmon says he's really good and we're going to use him in defensive zone faceoffs. That's one of the things McCrimmon said about him when they acquired him. And so when Marner first went to center, Colton Sissons was taking a ton of defensive zone faceoffs, right? It was Eichel, and then if it was a defensive zone faceoff that Eichel wasn't going to, it was Colton Sissons. But now he's hurt, which throws Hertl into that role. And this is a small sample size here, right? Where it's 8 games in total. But in the 8 games that Marner's been at center and Colton Sissons has been out, with Hertl on the ice, the Golden Knights have been outscored 8-3. And the expected goal rate is 46%, which 8-3 is way worse than that 46%, but 46% is still bad because since Hertl's been here, it's always been over 50, and it's often closer to 60 than it is to 50 because they're getting a lot of offensive zone time. Basically, because of the injuries, Mitch Marner has to play center. And because Marner's playing center out of position, Hertl's now being put into worse scenarios, and they can't score when Hertl's on the ice, because the other problem is with Marner at center, Cassidy is trying to give him good wingers. Last game, who were his wingers? It was Pavel Dorofeyev and Mark Stone, right? Like, if you were to go through right now and say, what are the best wingers we can put on a line together? It's Pavel Dorofeyev and Mark Stone, because Marner's playing center, right? So the 2 best options at winger were with Marner. And they're in the offensive zone all the time. While Hertl's getting paired up, or not paired up, but trioed up, that's not a saying, with Riley Smith, with Jonas Rondbjerg. Like, he's now getting the cast-offs that are on the 3rd and 4th lines on a regular basis playing next to him. So Hertl's got to start farther away from the net. He's no longer playing with the good goal scorers. He's playing with the guys who can't score goals. And we're seeing those effects. When he's on the ice at 5-on-5, the Golden Knights are bad. They're not good. And so you have this ripple effect of problems. And I don't think this is Tomas Hertl's fault. He's being put in a scenario where he's not likely to succeed. I don't think this is Mitch Marner's fault, because he's playing out of position, right? And Cassidy is trying to, protect him from defensive zone faceoffs. I guess protect the team from him losing defensive zone faceoffs. And then I don't blame Cassidy either, because, somebody has to play center. And right now, this team only has 2 true centers, Eichel and Hertl, on the team. So who else are you putting there, right? Mitch Marner probably makes the most sense of any of the wingers they have. Riley Smith has been the other one to get a big dose of center as well. He makes sense as well. Keegan Colasar probably could do that as well. I think he's got the most experience of any winger at center, but he would be a fourth line center that maybe you'd trust a little bit more in the defensive zone. But that's kind of it, right? Would Mark Stone work? I have no idea. But like, I don't blame Cassidy because he's got to figure things out that aren't supposed to work. There at no point was it like, oh yeah, we're going to have to put a lineup on the ice with two centers. Good luck with that one, right? Like, that's not a real thing that a coach should have to deal with. And what I think the real issue is goes all the way up to the front office. And it is Kelly McCrimmon's roster construction for this year. Yes, it is a little harsh because Carlson is hurt, Colton Sissons is hurt, and Brett Howden is hurt. And if you had one of those guys healthy, maybe there's less Hertl faceoffs in the defensive zone. Maybe not Howden. I don't know how exactly they'd approach it if it was Howden. But the other two, if they were healthy, they would be number 2 in line behind Eichel for defensive zone faceoffs, if not number 1 ahead of Eichel. So it's a little harsh, but Kelly McCrimmon gave his team 5 legitimate options at center for a season. We know guys get hurt. Kelly McCrimmon has manipulated long-term IR and injuries so much the NHL had to change the rules. He's aware guys get hurt, but he didn't create a roster with enough centers on it. And so how did that happen? Well, when they got Mitch Marner, do you remember who they traded away? It was Nick Waugh. Nick Waugh, for the last 2 seasons, had the highest defensive faceoff zone rate of any center on the team. They traded away the number 1 guy they were using in this role to bring in Mitch Marner. They did that to what? Maybe avoid some tampering charges. They didn't have to do that. They could have let Mitch Marner hit free agency and signed him the next day. But they traded away a guy who takes a bunch of defensive zone faceoffs, right? And brought in Sissons, but didn't add to that. And if you take this back to maybe the Tomas Hertl acquisition, is it smart to give up multiple first-round picks to get a center, high-paid center, that you don't want to put in these situations? If I told you, hey, this player is worth 2 first-round picks, and he can score 30 goals in a season. I think he's got 55 and 120 games is the number, right? He can get close to 30 goals in a season. Would you trade 2 first-round picks for that player if you understood, oh, well, the only way he's going to score 30 goals in a season is if he starts all of his shifts in the offensive zone and he gets to play with Pavel Dorofeyev and Mitch Marner, because those are his 2 most used wingers this season. That's not worth the value they gave up to get Tomas Hertl, right? That's a player who has to be in a good environment to produce. That's not worth it. So I think there are legitimate roster problems the Golden Knights are running into, and it's leading to 2 of their better players, 2 of their higher priced players being put into bad positions, bad situations. Marner's got to play out of position. Hertl's got to play with worse teammates and further away from the net. Like, it just puts 2 of your better players into bad situations. And now, when Hertl's on the ice, this team isn't good. Because it's not a good situation for him. And by the way, when Marner's on the ice, despite getting to play with better wingers than Hertl, and despite getting a whole bunch of offensive zone starts, they're not that good. In these games, since he's been at center, they're outscoring opponents 15-13, which is a positive, but it doesn't make up for how bad they've been when Hertl's on the ice. And by the way, the expected goal rate is at 49% with Marner at center. So that's not outweighing it. In theory, okay, Hertl, take the defensive zone stuffs. Yeah, we might lose when Hertl's on the ice, but it's okay because when Marner's on the ice with Stone and Dorofeyev and they're in the offensive zone, they're going to score a whole bunch of goals. That hasn't happened for this team. So they're running into these problems, and I think it comes from Kelly McCrimmon. That's where I think this issue actually is just the roster. It's flawed. It's not as good of a roster as you could have put together. And they traded for Rasmus Andersson before the trade deadline or before the Olympic deadline instead of a center. If Karlsson comes back, they'll be fine, right? If Karlsson doesn't come back, then you're really counting on Colton Sissons to be this, hey, cure our defensive zone face-offs problem and let Hertl go play somewhere else on the ice. That's sort of what they need. Is that it? That's not all. That's not their only problem. I'm not here to tell you this is why the team can't win games anymore, but it is a big problem that Bruce Cassidy's having to figure out on the fly with Marner and Hertl out of position or just in bad situations. Last thing on the Golden Knights, because this is a bummer, Jonas Rondbjerg is hurt. He got hurt in the loss to Anaheim on Sunday. Bruce Cassidy didn't have much of an update after that game, as is usual, but the Golden Knights yesterday placed Jonas Rondbjerg on IR. The reason this specifically sucks is Jonas Rondbjerg was chosen for Team Denmark in the Olympic Games. IR, I guess, doesn't mean he can't play in the Olympics, but it sounds like he's not going to be healthy enough to play in the Olympics. And that sucks, right? And I know realistically players can't just say I'm not playing. But like if I were named to an Olympic team, I wouldn't care at all about these next, 2 games for the Golden Knights before the Olympics. However many games my team had. My only goal in the next couple of games would be to not get hurt before the Olympics. That would be it. Because like, I'm sure this is just heartbreaking for Jonas Rondbjerg. You're going to play for Denmark and you're going to play in the Olympics. And you got hurt like a week before you're supposed to leave. It just sucks, right? And it's brutal for Jonas Rondbjerg if, in fact, he's going to miss the Olympics. And, like, I'm telling you, I know they can't do it. I know they're going to get fined, and you get so much negative publicity from it. But, my God, if I'm Jack Eichel, I'm like, I don't care about these next 2 NHL games in February. I'm going to be playing in the Olympics in, like, a week. I care about that, right? I shouldn't even – healthy scratch me. That's what I'd be asking for. Yes, please. Healthy scratch me. Make Hertl take all the defensive zone faceoffs. Like, I would, like, I have always thought the Olympics or international tournaments or whatever are important, and I love watching it. I can't imagine being the actual player to play in them. I'd be pumped about it. And then you get injured and you can't play. It's just a disaster. But that is it for Technically Correct. Thank you so much for tuning in.